Agentic analytics is hard because analytics is hard. Analytics writ large involves tackling really open-ended, challenging problems. The types of questions where it's like, how many sales did we have last month? That's pretty straightforward. It doesn't take a lot of analysis to go collect that data and print it out, put it in a table, put it in a chart, whatever. Analytics doesn't stop there. There's a much broader spectrum of complexity, nuance, ambiguity in the sort of question space that people have, where it's often challenging to verify, like, was this correct? It also involves potentially a bunch of different probes of information. Like, where do you get this context to answer this question? It could be from the data itself and running a query or many queries. It could be pulling from documentation to understand, and metadata to understand, like, what does this data mean? What is this table's list of users compared to this other user list of customers in this other table? And so there's like often a pretty complex variety of data sources and metadata sources that need to be brought in. It can be a mix of structured and unstructured data, keeping those all working smoothly, building search capabilities that can like efficiently and effectively retrieve the right information at the right time, and verifying that the performance of all of those steps in that chain are working, well, to deliver a successful response. Just adds a lot of complexity to the system to keep running smoothly. An agent today running a model from like 15 months ago, like Sonnet 3.7, would outperform a simple linear pipeline or one-shot LLM call with the latest LLMs like Opus 4 or 7. And I think that's true because an agent in this kind of even a simple graph structure is so much more capable than a one-off or a prescriptive workflow, which says LLM call, branch on condition, another LLM call, or print result. Good analysis or deep analysis often requires iteration and proposing counterfactuals and exploring challenges to the assumptions that you make, and bringing in caveats to your analysis. And all of that is kind of difficult to make a single plan up front that says this is the outlay of all the steps we're going to take, and then we're going to be done. Complex problem solving just often is iterative in nature and requires that kind of try something, see if it works, try something different, see if it works better. I think that's kind of core to a scientific method or any sort of iterative process or agile development. All of these things are iterative in nature, where you try something, you see what happens, you adjust and try something different. And that's kind of different from more static, like plan everything ahead workflows, where you might not see as much benefit from this kind of loop. I think as people like acclimate to working with agents and interacting with them, there's often an initial like wow moment, like wow, this could do more than I thought it could do. But if I think about what are the first couple of like complaints people have, they go in sort of two directions. One is like, I told you yesterday that this was wrong, and you're making the same mistake again today. Like, why can't you remember that? It's really frustrating to have someone that you're working with make the same mistake twice, especially after you've corrected them and told them like, I have this, prefer you do it this other way. And the second is like, you did this thing yesterday that I really liked. Why aren't you doing it exactly the same today? Why are you doing it different? So sometimes you wanted to learn and change, and sometimes you wanted to like be more repeatable. And so those are two avenues we've been pursuing. The first with learnings and background agents to address that case of fixing mistakes, not making the same mistake twice, and improving with usage. And really, like, as agents interact with humans, each interaction is an opportunity for the agent to learn and improve its system. And, right now we're focused on helping, like, with background agents and learnings, to help improve that context layer so that subsequent conversations have this improved context about the data and the problems it's trying to solve. And so we have background agents that are largely updating, improving context. And on the other side, I have, like, we've sort of co-developed this workflow, or I have this business process that I just want the agent to operate and continue and do the same next week when I ask you to do it again. I want the same usage report or analysis to be done exactly the same way. That's what we're building into workflows, is a more repeatable process, so that the agent has, like, a stricter recipe that when it's requested to do this thing, it follows these steps, and it just does it the same every time, or does it in a way that is not as flexible as a brand new prompt starting fresh from, like, let's explore and figure out how we solved it last time, but it can redo those steps more prescriptively. We want to assess, as we build this learning system and these background agents, with the impact they're having on the end result of those activities that we have the analysis agent doing. And so we've set up a test where we ran a set of evaluations with a benchmark set of questions to say, if I ask, a bunch of analytics questions on this data set and we score the results. And we do that in a few different cases. The first case, where it's just the agent just has access to the raw data and we score those results, it does really well on simple questions. And then as you get to more complex, nuanced, ambiguous questions, the scores drop down a bit. And so, hard questions are still hard for agents. And simple, straightforward questions, agents do, like, really well right now. The interesting space is, of these harder questions, how do we improve those? So we wanted to assess, if agent just has access to the raw data, it does, gets this score on a bank of questions. What if we then compare to, like, an agent that can run on the raw data plus our generated context layer? So that's like, when you onboard a data set, you talk to a context agent, you generate out a semantic model, you have data dictionaries and relationships and metrics and descriptions of what all the data means. And that's often done, upfront in a sort of one-off approach, and you can do that when you're onboarding. And so then we wanted to compare against this third scenario, where we simulate some usage. We ask a bunch of questions of the data set, and we have our background agents looking at that, reviewing that as they do in our product, and look at how SQL queries fail, look at how long it took things to run, just monitor the activity to understand what's going on, and use those signals to make improvements to the context layer. Then we can assess, how does the accuracy score do on this last case? And there we're starting to see, like, significant improvements in the overall accuracy of question answering, especially on the harder questions. And that's because, like, these background agents are able to pick up, like, hey, this question got tripped up by this mistaken join, or there were duplicates in this data set that weren't captured in this early analysis. Let's store a learning or store a description on the data set in the context layer that we'll learn from and not make that mistake next time. And so we're actually starting to see that reflected in these quantitative scores of improved accuracy, and in some cases reduced latency when the data modeling is done well. That's a really promising sign and demonstrating the value of what we're building in this learning system. We started with data sharing, make sure people have access to data and have the right access to the right data. And I think easing analysis with analytics agents helps more people get value out of data by lowering the barrier to asking questions and getting answers. I think as we think about learning as as a system, we're still looking at that full stack from data production to where it gets used. And I think that feedback cycle can go pretty far into the internals of data pipeline and lineage. And so I think a lot of the work we're thinking about recently has been what's the wider set of tasks upstream of the analysis in the data engineering space that can be enacted and automated and optimized. And that gets, into some of the data modeling piece as well, which is like, as we see real usage and get that feedback from the end use case, can we improve the speed or quality and reliability of all of the upstream data pipelines from the source to the consumer? I think there's also other opportunities in the learning front where so far we focus mostly on the context layer. We're starting to think about closer to the data layer of data models and data quality monitoring, things like that. We haven't focused much attention on learning as applied to the agent layer, where we can improve prompts and improve the agent behavior itself. So we kind of have the full stack from data, context, and the intelligence or reasoning layer, all being evaluated and enhanced through usage.